In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. As I mentioned last week to you, the first 2 Sundays of the month of Hatur, preceding the month of Kiyak, the church reads for us the parable of the sower. And we mentioned last week that there is a hidden assumption in the parable, and that is that there is a diligent farmer or a diligent sower. And again, it's assumed at the time because the Lord was speaking at a time where there was farming, and He was speaking to people who would farm. So again, this was a given. But nowadays, this is not always the given. There are many things that we don't do anymore, or at least, for whatever reason, whether it's technology or the development of machinery, larger machinery, and so on. But we spoke about the idea of being lazy. And I think this is a common, sin that many of us struggle with. And we spoke last week about maybe the way in which we can evaluate myself. Am I lazy in a certain aspect of my life? And we said there are many forms of laziness. There's physical laziness, of course. There's mental laziness. There's spiritual laziness. And there's, as we said last week, there's the productive laziness, where we just stay busy doing other things rather than what we should be or ought to be doing. And we mentioned last week many of the proponents of laziness. What are things that can lead to laziness? Among them is the comfort culture. Everything is provided for us. Procrastination, discouragement, low self-esteem, despair, distractions, pampering the flesh, lazy company, and so on. This week we'll speak a few words about overcoming laziness. We'll speak about the dangers of leaving it unaddressed, and then how can we overcome it. What are some of the dangers if we realize that we are lazy, or we have a sort of lazy tendency in our life, and just leaving it and ignoring it, not working on it? What is the potential, or what is the danger of this? The first danger is the loss of opportunity. There's going to be a loss of opportunity. In the book of Proverbs it says what? He who gathers in the summer is a wise son. He who sleeps in harvest is a son who causes shame. We mentioned last week, we mentioned the same verse, is that if I don't, till the ground in the right time, then I could never plant the seed at the right time, nor to get the crop, right? So if I don't do things at the right time, then I lose opportunity, have a benefit of the land or the crop. The same way, if I continue in laziness, then I'll lose opportunities that I have for the future. Again, in Ephesians, St. Paul says what? See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. So he says redeem the time, because the time is passing. We are all getting closer to the day of our departure, every day that passes by and every moment that passes by. So what am I going to present before the Lord if I every day goes by and I'm not productive and I don't do anything? I'll come to Him with nothing. And again, why is this a sin? If you remember the parable of the talents, the person who had 5 talents made 5 more. The one who had 2 made 2 more. And the one who had 1, what did he do? He buried it, right? And what was the rebuke of the Lord? He told him, you wicked and lazy servant. So this was the cause of his condemnation. He was cast into outer darkness because he was lazy, right? So lazy is just not something that we ought to be ignoring, but it's something that we ought to be struggling with and trying to get out of this. And many times and how many hours do we spend, as the youth would say, doom scrolling, right? We get on our phone and they just scroll, and we spend hours on the phone doing nothing, right? You can spend 8, 9 hours, maybe even more, in a day, and then nothing was productive the whole day besides being informed of what everybody else is doing in their life. So again, we forfeit these opportunities. And again, if you think about, I'm not sure if I mentioned this last time, but if you think about any of the good memories we've had in our life, none of us will have great memories of time we spent on our phone looking at our phone. But it's rather, okay, we took a vacation, we went to this place, even in a hardship. I remember so-and-so was sick, and God helped them, and we went and visited them in the hospital. We create memories by interacting with people and with God and fellowship with one another. We don't create memories, doing nothing or being lazy. The second reason why we can't leave this unattended, or the danger of leaving it unattended, is the spiritual decline. When I do nothing, things will decline, right? My prayer will decline, the temptations, of course, will decline because the grace that's covering me is no longer there. So I'll be more vulnerable to temptation. And it's kind of like a campfire. If anybody's lit a campfire before, you put the wood in, and you put maybe things to start the fire, and you get this fire going. What happens if you leave the fire and do nothing? It's quenched and it'll go out. How do you keep the fire going? By adding more wood. It has to be an active process, right? So if we do nothing, the fire is quenched. The same goes in our life. The more that we do nothing, the fire of the Holy Spirit will be quenched in us. The fire of maybe a certain ambition will be quenched in us. So everything will be quenched if I don't work and have some kind of discipline. So, and many things can quench spiritually. Our love for God will quench, will become less. I won't love God as more. I'll feel like I don't love Him as much. My desire to be in church, to even commune with Him will be less. My desire to suffer for the sake of another person, again, will become less. Because again, the world is selfish and man is selfish by nature, and only when we get to know God and we love Him do we become less selfish. So all of these things, they'll have this general spiritual decline. Also, there's poverty, can be, if it's left unattended, will become impoverished. And again, it says, the soul of a lazy man desires and has nothing. He desires and has nothing, right? He's impoverished. He wants, but he's not willing to work to get anything. There's a mantra, mantras are like sayings, like, I guess, imsal, right? Or like proverbs. There's a mantra that, is common nowadays that says what? Work smarter, not what? Harder. Okay? The mantras when I was younger, right? No pain, no. And you guys are saying it, Shabab, they don't know this one, right? No pain, no gain, right? And there's also one that said practice makes perfect. Okay, good. Winners never quit and quitters never win. So again, the idea is very different, right? One is don't work hard, and the other is you never succeed if there's no pain or working hard, right? This will lead to poverty. Many of people, many youth now, they say, okay, when I want to do things to get money fast, whether I want to, buy and sell online, or whether I want to do stocks and day trading and all of this stuff, or even they turn to gambling to try to make, again, the idea is what? How can I do something or get something without working or minimal effort? And I finished college and they say, okay, they want to be the CEO and the title and the salary, but they don't want to work and build themselves up. Again, it's a different mentality. Laziness leaves us impoverished spiritually, physically, socially, and professionally as well. Many people will ask, okay, why is it sometimes I don't feel God's presence? Why don't I feel God's presence? Maybe the question I can ask myself, okay, do I present myself to God to be able to feel His presence? Can I feel His presence if I don't stand in prayer, if I don't open His Word and read the Scripture and want to spend time with Him? Do I come to the liturgy early enough to be able to pray? Again, am I presenting myself to Him or not? And if not, why do I expect to have a rich relationship with God if I don't present myself to Him? Right? So again, laziness will leave us in poverty in every aspect of our life. Also, number 4, ruined relationships. Laziness will ruin relationships if it's left unattended. Laziness in communication, right? If I say to myself, okay, every time I get in an argument with someone, whether it's my wife or my husband or my children or even my friends, every time I would try to talk and communicate, it turns south. For why bother? I'm not going to do it anymore. Then I become lazy in the desire to communicate. Then what happens? Again, the relationship will be corrupted. It will get ruined. Laziness and desire for reconciliation. Again, anytime we want to reconcile, it takes work, right? Maybe it takes humility. Maybe it takes embarrassment for me to apologize and acknowledge what I have done. It'll take courage, because again, it's risky. They may not acknowledge my apology or want to even reconcile, and I've made myself vulnerable and they didn't acknowledge it. Again, it's a risk. But again, if I'm not willing to work and take the risk, can there be any reconciliation? There can't. There can't. Again, laziness in serving one another. It will ruin relationships. I'll bring you back to the story of the rich man and Lazarus. Okay, The rich man, of course, was lazy in his desire to serve his neighbor, right? Lazarus is at his door day and night wanting just something to eat. And he gave him nothing. He tried to eat the bread which fell from the rich man's table. And then when he was injured and sores were on him, he didn't help him, but he left the dogs to go and lick his wounds. What was the impact of this? Perhaps for the rich man, there was no impact for him while he was alive. But it's very clear when Christ tells the story that the impact came later in the afterlife. The moral of the story you'll find is that his laziness increased the suffering of his neighbor. Laziness increased the suffering of his neighbor while he was on earth and increased his suffering in the afterlife. Okay? So, this is why St. James, he teaches us and tells us what? To him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. To him who knows to do good and doesn't do it, it means who's lazy, who knows what the good to do and I'm lazy enough to do it, then to him it is a sin. Also, if we leave it unattended, we become a burden to others. The lazy man or the lazy woman is the person who is always a burden on the others. They shift the responsibility to the family. I don't want to do anything in the house. I don't want to help. I just go to work and come back and everybody else should serve me or whatever. Or maybe the responsibility of raising children. All I need to do is bring the children to the church, and I don't have to do anything. I can sit on the computer, on the phone, and just take my kids to church and they'll do it. Again, this lazy idea, again, will put a burden on others. Maybe even on our friends. How does this contrast with what St. Paul teaches us? He says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. The Bible teaches the opposite, to bear one another's burdens, not to burden others with what is supposed to be ours. Lastly, sin grows quickly in idleness. So if we leave it unattended, the sin will grow quickly. You know, there's again the famous saying that says what? An empty mind is the devil's playground. Empty, why? The lazy mind is the devil's playground. If there's nothing here to think about that's good, then only bad will be here, right? And then the devil will have his playground in my mind. St. Anthony, the father of the monks, he taught his disciples and their disciples taught their disciples about the manual work. And it says, he said that always have some manual work so that the devil may find you occupied. Be doing something, whether you're praying or you're working manually with your hand, whether it's sewing baskets or whatever, it's planting or whatever it is, that do something. So the devil comes to tempt you, you're not doing anything, and then he'll find you an easy target. But if I'm always busy, whether in mind or physically, then I'm busy, I'm occupied. It's just like somebody coming to you and wanting to talk to you about something when you're pressed for time, whether you're studying for an exam that's going to happen in the next hour, or you have a deadline that you're trying to meet and somebody's coming to try to talk to you. Tell them, wait a minute, I'm busy, I can't talk, I'm pressed for time. So if the Satan comes and he looks at us and you find you busy, pressed for time, then you won't have time to think about what he's presenting before you. But if I'm just doom scrolling, then everything becomes a temptation from what I'm listening to, what I'm seeing, and even Satan's words. So how is it that we can overcome laziness? What's the path of diligence? The first is to ask for his grace. Ask for God's grace. As it says, the Lord said to St. Paul, my grace is sufficient for you, my strength is made perfect in weakness. Acknowledge your weakness, that maybe I'm lazy in my mind, maybe I'm lazy physically, maybe I'm lazy spiritually. Acknowledge this and pray and ask God, give me your grace to get me out of this laziness, because I know this laziness is dangerous for me and for those who are around me. Laziness is healed by my work and also by God's grace, right? The two work synergistically together, and we need both. Number two is start with small, consistent actions. Break things down, right? If we always look and say, okay, I have this ambition and this big task, and we look at it as something very daunting. Like, for example, if you want to read a book, and the book is like 250 or 300 pages, or maybe 700 pages, you look at this and say, there's no way. Why even bother starting? Because it's too big. I'm never going to get through it. With this mentality, again, it's a lazy mentality. But if you go and say, I'm going to read 1 page a day. Okay, and you start reading a page, maybe 1 day or 2 days read more than 1 page. Eventually you'll find in a few months you'll be through the book. Again, it just takes baby steps. It's kind of like a loaf of bread, right? You have a whole loaf of bread when no one eats it all at once, but what do? We slice it in small pieces, and we eat little by little every day. If you want to pray with Igbeya, and you say, you know what, I haven't started praying with Igbeya, and I know I should be praying with Igbeya. Start small. Okay, start with the Thanksgiving prayer and Psalm 50. Build a habit, a routine. Set a certain schedule. Before I leave my room, I pray. And if I don't pray, I don't eat breakfast. Okay, set for yourself kind of these rules with your father, direction of your father of confession, and start small. And it's easier to add to it later if there is already a routine that's there. But if there's no routine, the key is to make the routine in the beginning. Structure your time, as I mentioned just now, to make your time, like have a time that's scheduled. So there's no room for, leaving it up to whatever happens in the day. The most secure times are in the morning, right? Most of us, if you wake up in the morning, you have a certain routine by the time you leave the house. Whether you wake up, you brush your teeth, you brush your hair, you take a shower, you eat, and then you're out the door. Put prayer somewhere in between there, so that it's part of a routine every day. Same thing when you get home. There's often a small evening routine. Put it into the evening routine so it becomes something you do, every day. If it's something that's not spiritual, maybe like, your family has told you don't spend enough time with us. Okay? Put time that you spend with your family in your calendar. And it's booked. So if your work says, I need you so-and-so, you look at your calendar and say, I'm sorry, I'm booked, have another appointment that time. And that time is booked for your family or whatever. If it's something for church, like church service or cleaning, again, put it in the calendar. We all have calendars now on our phones and so on, or even if you have like a real calendar or a notepad, you can put that in there. And this becomes, okay, this is on my schedule now, and I see it and it's in front of me every day. Fight the first thought. The first thought is often later, tomorrow, I'll put it off, okay, I'm busy at the moment. The good thing to do is what? When you remember, to do it then. When you're told to do something maybe by your parents, you do it now, right? Don't put things off, don't procrastinate. So try to fight that first thought of later, right? And if you can do it now, especially if what you're doing in the middle when you were asked is something that's trivial. Number 5 is to work. Okay, the physical discipline in every aspect of your life helps all the other discipline. So if somebody's physically disciplined, for example, if somebody plays sports or is an athlete, and they wake up every morning at 5 a.m., they exercise, they eat a certain type of diet, and then they go to work and so on. You find this discipline. In all likelihood, they're disciplined in every other aspect of their life. So start to be disciplined, right? Whether it's physically, and then this will be extend to other parts of your life, in fasting and labor and so on. It's kind of like rehab. You have to have work. If anybody is bedridden for a certain period of time in the hospital, then the muscles get weak. So how do we strengthen the muscles again? It needs rehab. Exactly what we were doing before, we need to do it more. So if I wasn't walking, I need to walk more, right? So it's the work and the labor that gets us to get out of the laziness. This is why as I mentioned before, the monastic fathers, they taught this principle and this discipline of having work in their life besides just prayer and attending the church services. Also, having accountability is going to help. So tell your spiritual father that I'm struggling with laziness, and come up with a plan and say, okay, let's be accountable. I want you to do A, B, and C, and come back and tell me, in a month or 2 months how and how many times you did something. So you're accountable. If it's not your spiritual father, it can be a family member, it can be a good friend. Hold each other accountable. When we're held accountable, we're less likely to become lazy. Lastly is to remember the goal. Our goal is to become Christ-like. Christ was never idle. What did he say? He said in John 5, my Father has been working until now, and I have been working. So he is always working. Remember that our goal is to become Christ-like. And doing nothing will never get us there, right? Only when we work and do something. And sometimes you'll find the work is in the wrong direction. It's fine, but I'm working. Let's change the direction, right? St. Paul was working in the direction of persecuting the Christians. But he was working, right? So Christ says, you know what, let's turn you to the right direction. And he took off running, kept working, because that's who he was, right? Why is it worth the fight? All of this, why is it worth the fight to fight laziness? Because discipline will transform our life. When we are disciplined, whether spiritually and physically or mentally, this will transform our life. We have to begin. And there's a reward. We said the curse was upon the one who had the 1 talent, right? He said, you wicked and lazy servant. But what about the ones who worked? Even if it was little, the 2 talents, what did he tell him? Good and well done, good and faithful servant. He got praise from God, right? He got praise from him. So it's worth our effort, because God will praise the one who is a diligent worker. And diligence is also an expression of love. When I serve others and I work for others, this is the sign that I love them, because I work to do something for them. Whether it's serving God, our family, or our friends, it's an expression of our love. And lastly, we look at the examples of the saints. There was no saint in our church that was a lazy saint, right? All of them were diligent in one way or shape or form. There's a story about Abba Paul, the simple, who was weaving baskets day and night, and he would give the proceeds to the poor. So someone came and asked him, why is it that you work so hard? And he replied and said, because when my hands are busy, my heart is with God. So he says, when I'm busy, my heart is with God. And again, he's working while he's praying, right? So he's not saying he's just working, being idle, doing nothing, right? But he's working, and he was praying while he's working. But again, he's working, he's busy, and his heart is with God. So again, the sin of laziness is prevalent. It's in society. It's all around us. We must be, vigilant of it in ourselves, to look at ourselves and see, okay, where do I need to improve? Don't allow yourself to grow more lazy and to put burden on others, but let's take some of our own responsibilities. Don't make excuses. And I'll leave you with a saying by Saint Isaac the Syrian. He said, ease and idleness are the destruction of the soul, and they can injure her more than the demons. He said, the lazy soul can injure us more than the demons injure us. May God grant us to see ourselves first. Again, we said in the very beginning last week that this was not for us to think about others, but to think about ourselves. Okay, where is it in my life that maybe I need to be more diligent? May God strengthen you and me for the glory of His holy name. To God be the glory forever and ever. Amen.